I'm trapped in a mansion full of werewolves. And the one who claims to protect me is also the one who hurts me the most. How can I escape this world full of contradictions and dangers? Chapter 10, Part 3, Authors P. O.V. Liam slammed the door shut and double-locked it, while keeping a firm grip on Skye as she fuddled and sobbed at the sound of the lock's turnings. "Please, she begins to say, but it cut off by Liam's piercing yellow eyes as he clamps his hands back over her mouth, causing her to scream into it. He ignores her squirming and screaming as he walks her to the sofa, gently letting her go, only for her to fall down sobbing on it. Skye covers her face with her hands and uncontrollably sobs while bringing her knees closer to her chest when the realization of what she was wearing comes into her mind, causing her to sob even louder. Liam sighs and leans his back at the desk behind him as he looks at the girl sobbing uncontrollably in front of him. Not taking it, he closed his eyes and tilts his head back, listening to her cries. She looked so defenseless, in so much pain that it made him wonder if he had been too rough with her. Sympathy begins to build up in his heart as he hears her sobs even after 15 minutes go by, when suddenly she stops and begins taking deep breaths to calm down her hysteria. Liam opens his eyes to find her staring at him with hope. Her eyes were bloodshot and her face was paler than usual, with her cheeks wet from tears which continued to overflow. Just, she begins to say, but is cut off by her quivering lips and shaking as she takes another deep breath and starts again as Liam looks at her with a straight face, his arms folded over his broad chest. "I want tea too." But she gets cut off with her hysteria again, and a sob escapes her lips as more tears fall from her eyes. Home. She shudders as she tries to control her breathing. Please. Home, she says, looking at him while continuously shaking, hugging herself tighter in an attempt to control her sobs. Liam sighs and looks at the floor. Please, she says, and her voice begins to quiver as silent tears fall down her face. She must have looked like a wreck. Liam gives her another glance and his heart begins to twist. He was the one causing her this pain. His beautiful little mate was hurt because of him, but this was for her good only. If she was to be alone even for a second outside his care, they would find her and use her against him. And he could not let this happen, but the sound of her cries was too much for him. He wanted to make her happy, make her his, but she wasn't even willing to accept what he was. Not taking it anymore, he goes behind his desk to the mini fridge and grabs a water bottle with the top sealed, so she doesn't think he did anything to it. Grabbing the cool bottle in his hands, he looks at Skye, who looked as if she would die any moment now. Taking a deep breath, he silently moves towards her, with her watching his every movement. Just as he begins to come near her, she pushes herself into the sofa and the stream down her cheeks just as she takes a sharp intake of breath, but Liam was not going to back down either. Skye closes her eyes shut as she feels him coming closer to her. Maybe he was going to hit her. Skye's breathing stopped just as Liam crouched in front of her and gently took her hand, but quickly placed the bottle and let go when she began to shake uncontrollably. He didn't want her to faint again. Skye opened her eyes at the feeling of the cold water bottle in her hands and looked at it confused before pushing it away from her and looking at Liam, who was massaging his temples, his eyes flickering from gold to his original emerald green. "It's water and I swear I didn't do anything to it," he says, and Skye doesn't utter a single word as she just stares at him. She was getting tired by the second, and if he tried anything she would faint. Lucky for her, her breathing had come into check, but the silent tears still flowed. "I'm fine," she whispers, her throat dry, causing Liam to clench and unclench his jaw at her discomfort. "Might as well get this over with. Look, Skye, I know you're overwhelmed with fear right now, but you must understand that I can't let you go back home," Liam says, and Skye's expression doesn't change. "Why?" she whispers as another tear falls down her cheek. "We're under attack and you seem to be a person of interest to them. Let's just say it's for your own safety. Your father has been informed of this situation, and so is Linda. You will be staying here for the next few days or so until the threat is completely gone," Liam says, professionally building up the semi-lie. "There must be a mistake. I'm a mere human. I'm not supposed to be into this," she says, and Liam looks at her with amusement. "Well, anyone who comes into my territory is my responsibility, and after all the extreme events, this is necessary," Liam says, and Skye looks straight into his eyes. "Then let me go back to Australia," she says, and Liam's eyes flickered gold as he clenched his hand into a fist. You're not leaving, and this is final. Liam says, and his voice booms across the room, causing Sky to jump as she looks at him. His eyes were piercing into her. The gold irises seemed anything but inviting. You're not leaving this place ever. The voice says, but it wasn't Liam's anymore. This was a whole different side of him as he stalked towards her, and Sky screamed, scrambling away from him, but he grabs her upper arm, causing her to stand up. Sky begins to sob as he lifts her from her arm up to his level, her feet barely touching the ground and her legs very much exposed. She closes her eyes shut as she tried to get her arm out of his grip, but it tightens, causing her to sob louder. Yo, at me. The voice seethes and Sky sobs, not opening her eyes. Please let, she begins to say, but Liam tightens his grip on her arm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Hearts out saints say your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Look at me, he says, and his claws extend into her arms, causing her to let out an ear-piercing scream, but he doesn't let go. Sky was screaming at the top of her lungs because of the pain, but it was like Liam didn't care. His wolf was out of control because of her defiance. He grabs a jar with his other hand and tilts it towards his face as she sobbed. Open them, he says, and his claws caress the side of her eyes, causing her to open them from fear. She didn't want his claws in her eyes next. He stared into her eyes, which was nothing but bleeding red because of her tears, but Liam's wolf was too angry. That wasn't too hard. Letting her go and watches her body drops on the floor. Sky screams as his claws get out of her arm and Liam grabs her throat. Shut up, he says, glaring at her as she tried to breathe. She was feeling light-headed as the blood gushed out of her upper arm, not to mention the amount of force Liam was putting on her throat. Please, Sky pleaded as she felt the life being drained out of her. Maybe this was it. Death was presenting itself to her. But where was the flashback they say you had before you die? Where was the relief? The relaxation? Her thoughts were interrupted when suddenly Liam let go of her. Let me show you something. Liam says, and Sky's body went limp. Chapter 10, part for authors P.O.V. Let me show you something. Liam says, and Sky's body went limp. Liam was pacing in his room while tugging at his hair in frustration. He made for holes in the wall and still felt horrendously aggravated. What had he done? He was beyond bothered but angrier at his wolf. If he could, he would have killed the damn thing, but how can one kill a part of them and still want to stay alive for the love of their life? Is that even possible? He could feel his wolf whimpering, but to hell with it. It was his fault that both of them were going to suffer very, very dearly, because now Sky would be shitload afraid of him. Not that he could blame her. She had too much on her plate. He had never seen her so traumatized like that. Hell. She was sobbing as if he was going to torture her. Poor girl. Liam dared to give the unconscious girl a side glance, but his heart would beat faster from pain. The pain he had caused her. She barely had a heartbeat. The doctor had told him that she was going to be okay, but she would need massive time to recover due to the suffocation and internal injuries. They had put her in an induced coma because she was too fragile, and that was better for her. In this way, she would wake up completely recovered. But for now, she looked like a wreck with tubes attached to her and machines monitoring her. The beeping of the machines attached to her created a rhythm in the room. Beep, 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 beep. Never-ending and irritating. She also looked as pale as a ghost. Sometimes Liam forgot that she was a human, weak and defenseless. This was the first time in ages he was meeting a human. He forgot how gentle you needed to be with them. Sky thinks that his father is a human, but he's half werewolf. Liam's ears perked up at the sound of angry footsteps approaching the room, and no later an angry Blake slammed the door open. His eyes traveling to Sky with pain, then landing on Liam. Liam wanted to tell Sky that Blake's not dead. What she saw that day was an illusion created to hurt her. To make her weak. What the hell you did to her? Blake shouts, but Sky was too deep in her slumber to react. Her heartbeat remained as it was. Slow. Get out. Liam growls and Blake snarls at him, his eyes changing to a freakish orange. It was extraordinary how every wolf had their unique eye color, the alphas being more dominant. I want to know what the hell happened to her, and I don't give a damn if you kill me just because I set your mind right and prevent another thing like this. Blake says, and Liam clenches his fist. In a split second, Liam and Blake were standing face to face, glaring at each other before Liam punched Blake on the nose and Blake laughed as he heard the crack. "So manhandled her," Blake says mockingly while cradling his nose that was bleeding. Even Liam was shocked from where the surge of courage came to him, but he couldn't do Blake much damage. He was a lawyer lass and he's going to be his beta. "I said get out." Liam booms and grabs the lamp beside him, chucking it at Blake, who dodges the throw. "Is that what you did to her too? Chuck a lamp at her poor self," Blake says, and Liam tackles him to the floor, punching him repeatedly in the face before Blake counters and turns them so he was pinning him. "Look at yourself, Liam," Blake says, and turns Liam's face to the full-length mirror on the opposite wall. Liam looked vicious with Blake's blood on him. His eyes were gold and everything about him was inhuman. "I know your wolf is at its peak because you haven't mated with Sky, but you need to control it. Liam, our pack is in danger with us being practically hunted." 3 more bodies were found, ripped to shreds by the river where our pack hunt. "I know that you want her, but if you keep doing all this, she's going to be scared of you until she can't take it anymore. Just give her some space and let her be. She'll come around," Blake says, breathing hard, and Liam blinks, his eyes back to normal as Blake get off him and slowly left the room before looking at Sky and shaking his head. Liam was up from the floor in seconds as he looked around the room. It was messed up. He looks at Sky and makes his way to her side. He mumbles as he brushes her hair out of her face and passionately kisses her forehead. She doesn't react. Not one bit. But what could he have expected? She was a human. Weak as she was and now sporting vicious claw marks on her upper arm and bluish-black bruises on her neck. Bruises that were given by him. He can't control himself anymore, and it's getting difficult every passing day, but he doesn't want to scare her away either. Though he had accomplished that on the peak of everything. His mind was more than occupied. 3 more bodies found. Things didn't seem good. It was a question how his pack was being hunted so easily. The pack that was indestructible was falling, and he can't let that happen. Liam's features began to turn cold again as he turned away from Sky and made his way to the door, remembering the note that bastard had conveyed him through Sky. It wasn't much. Barely 10 words, but all that there was made his blood boil. "Keep an eye out for the pretty little mate of yours, Kane VC. Out of all the things in the world he dares threaten his mate. He had some guts. Too bad they were going to be sprawled on the ground along with many of his body parts when he was going to be done with him. Somewhere, master. He is hurting his possession. Do you want us to attack?" The slave says, scared, while standing in front of his mahogany desk, while the master seated behind it, his back to the slave. Even though he had done his job quite precisely, he was still scared. He remembers what his master did to Gabriel, who he had sent to bring that girl. Not only he had gone against his orders and hurt the girl, but failed to bring her to him, which resulted in dire consequences. The master fed him to the dogs while making the rest of the slaves watch with him as he cackled and laughed at the screams, and when the slave refrained, the master went straight up and ripped his head off, making a sickly sound as the bluish-black glob of sticky liquid poured out like acid. The slave looked at his master for the answer, but the master only laughed at Liam's poor attempt to protect his mate. Did he honestly think that keeping the girl caged can keep her safe from him? No, not at all. Where would be the fun in that? The master says in his voice laced with dark thoughts as revenge. The revenge he had waited for centuries. He turns around now facing the slave and brings the gold glass filled with red wine to his lips and takes a sip, thinking of the things Gay to Liam's mate when he had her. His reddish, brown hair fell over his soulless eyes, which were the lightest shade of grey with specks of red to add to his scary aura. He knew every single detail about the girl. Her past, present, and the painful future that was waiting for her. He hadn't seen the girl himself till now, nor had it bothered. He didn't want to ruin the surprise. He liked a little mystery to everything. "I want you to keep a very close eye on her," he says in his thick British accent. The accent he was born with in the 18th century. "Of course, master," the slave says and bows his head, his long hair falling on either side of him before he closed the door and left. The master smiled heavily as he got up and made his way to the window, cracking his knuckles, which were sporting gold rings, as he fixed his attire. It was all for this century, but he preferred it. His attire consisted of a pair of black pants and a shirt with heavy gold chains, in which he also hid many of his daily used weapons of amusing tortures. Knives in the letter. He drew his gaze out of the thick trees that kept him hidden from Liam's and his pack view. Not that it mattered. He could finish them with a flick of his wrist, but then where would be the amusement? The fun? The pain? He grinned sinisterly as he recalled his plan. All the wheels were set in motion. He just needed the girl and he would hear the melodious sound of the alpha withering away. Maybe afterward he could finish their entire race. They were an abomination after all. Things like them were not intended to walk on the ground. Disgusting animals. But right now only Alpha Liam Kane mattered. The strongest of their kind and his most hated enemy. Well, the only enemy that still had his head connected to his body. Liam was going to be tortured, slowly and painfully for what he had done. And who would do that better than himself? Valentine Carson, the Vampire Lord. Chapter 11 authors P.O.V. Sky's eyes opened to the continuous sound of beeping. It was irritating. She slowly opened her eyes, squinting themselves in the dimly lit room. Everything was dark and the only light that came into the room was the outline of sunshine from the curtained window. Sky moved her head to the source of the beeping and found a monitor with tubes coming out of it. It took her seconds to realize that the tubes were attached to her and the monitor was a heart monitor. Sky's torso rose up in shock as her eyes traveled to the unfamiliar room and memories whirled in her head. Liam. Sky looked around her and saw various nursing tools. A drip and several other devices. She looked at them with hatred and before she could comprehend what she was doing she plunged them out of her hand rudely, puncturing her skin, but she didn't care as she took deep breath, staggering to the full-length mirror at the corner of the room. She was in the same clothes as earlier but they were not matted with dry blood along with her hair. She could see the faint scars of stitches on her upper arm and the fading bruise on her neck. How long was she asleep for these wounds to heal so quickly? Not that it mattered. She could die and she didn't care. No one else probably did either. She was abandoned and alone here for people to take advantage of. Beat her, fix her and repeat right. Sky felt disgusted. She wanted to let her anger out. She wanted to scream and scream until her soul would leave her body. She couldn't deal with this. This was too much for her. She was small. Her Teton never had as much as hit a fly. She was no match of their giant semi-dog human creatures. They would wobble up like candy and leave her bones to play fetch with. A sense of helplessness filled Sky as she quietly limped back to the bed and sat down. Self-pity overpowering her anger. She was going to die like this in the hands of the people she trusted. Blake. Linda, awful father who didn't give two shits to let her be in Australia. If she could have just rejected, other arrangements would have been made and Sky would have been with her uncle. To some extent she even trusted Liam, but he was a monster. Everyone was. They would never care for her. She would die here. Pain welled up inside Sky as she thought of her death. She hadn't even had her first kiss yet. Never went to Disneyland. Never had her first drink. Never went to a club. Nothing. She was going to wither away. As Sky's mind wandered more and more she felt more helpless. She would never get to say goodbye to her uncle. Tears streamed down her face as she closed her eyes and shakily looked around the room. She wasn't going to give up that easily. She certainly won't go down without a fight. She took a deep breath and got up. Few drops of blood staining the floor from her hand where she had removed the tubes. The first thing she did was make her way to the window. She could just climb out and run like hell. Sky nodded at the idea and lifted the side of the curtain a bit, squinting her eyes from the sharp sunlight. As soon as her vision focused, her heart began to beat loudly. They were so high, probably 20 feet above the ground. A fall like that could kill her. She looked beyond and saw nothing but a thick forest extending into nothingness. They were so deep, she could never have wondered the forest that seemed so harmless would be her captivity. Sky backed away from the window and ran her hands through her hair. There could be something here that would help her. Anything. She looked around the room and her eyes landed on the clock. 3 p.m. No wonder the sun was scorching, but even then the weather was a bit pleasant. She needed to get out. Now maybe no one was home. Maybe she could go by undetected. But first, she needed clothes. Sky staggered around the room making minimum noise as she opened the drawers and cabinets but found nothing but boy stuffs laced in a lot of cologne. Everything smelled like Liam. Skye shuddered when she spotted another drawer and sprang towards it, and to her surprise she found her clothes neatly folded there along with another item. A floral cardigan. It took her some time to realize that the cardigan was actually hers. What was it doing with him? You know what? She didn't even want to know. Skye angrily grabbed the stuff and looked for the bathroom, which was at the other corner of the room. She grabbed the clothes and rushed inside, removing the sticky clothes from her body before washing her dirty face and putting her previous clothes on. At least the clothes were clean. She grabbed the hair tie and put her greasy hair in a quick bun before searching for something to pick the lock. The bathroom was huge, but she couldn't find anything worth her escape. She looked in the cabinet when she saw a small hairpin in the corner, hidden behind the toiletries. She looked at the pin carefully. It was a bit rusty, but it would do. She carefully walked back into the room and straight towards the door and turned the knob. It was locked as expected. She took the rusty hairpin and jammed it inside the lock. It had to work. It worked in the tea. All the time, surely it can't be that difficult. Skye rammed the pin inside the lock. After about 5 minutes she was going to lose hope when she heard a satisfying but faint click. Skye's breathing stopped as she looked at the lock. Had it worked? She took the pin out and slowly turned the doorknob, and to her surprise, the door opened. Skye felt hope and triumph as she looked at the rusty pin in relief and tucked it in her pocket for future use. This was it. She just needed to work things out properly. She opened the door completely and peeked her head out. Nothing but silence. That was good. She soundlessly padded down the stairs and into the same hallway she had wandered that night. Now to think of it. How long was that night ago? She'll find out later. Right now. Eyes on the prize. Skye looked at the hallway, which seemed completely unfamiliar as sunlight poured in and illuminated it. But these were the same confusing and unforgiving hallway she had to pass. She waited a moment and listened, but continued forward when she heard nothing. She remained vigilant, not wanting to get lost. Just as she was about to make a right turn, she noticed the stairway at the left. It was huge, however it was in the corner, and someone could easily miss it. She quickly changed her route and went to the staircase, which one after another went down. Throughout the house, there was eerie silence, making Skye wonder where the inhabitants were. Not that she was complaining. The house was extremely big, more like a private estate, with posh paintings and even posh furniture. Most of it being mahogany, giving it a fine look. After the 8th floor, Skye felt exhausted but surprised at the sudden change of the architecture. There was no staircase beyond, indicating this might be the ground floor. Skye looked out and saw that she was right. The sight of the grass made her want to kiss it. She didn't spare a moment to wonder as her eyes began traveling for a door or an open window. Anything. No one was home, and she knew they would be getting soon though. She had taken a lot of time climbing down and finding her way. Skye looked around the grand foyer before going to the first door on the left. However, it opened to a huge dining room. She let out a frustrated cry before closing the door and making her way to the one on the right, which opened to a kitchen. She ushered in and looked for a back door, but it didn't have one, but her eyes did land on a schedule. She looked at the top of the paper and saw big letters in bold. Training schedule. 5 am, 7 am warm up, 9 am, 11 am defense, 2 p.m, 5 p.m. offense. How could they do all this every day? How is that even possible? She mumbled but shook her head. She can't waste time. She rushed back into the main foyer. Where could the front door be? Then suddenly something clicked. Door slides. Usually, houses with grand foyers had slide doors. She turned around and saw a beautiful glass door. She was so stupid. Happily, she began to approach it but suddenly stopped. Her smile faded when she started making the outline of a single silhouette through the glass door. It only took her a second to realize the situation. Her heart drummed loudly and she could feel her blood rushing through her body. She looked at the time and saw it was striking 4 p.m. This was too soon. She thought as she ran to hide somewhere. Anywhere to get past this single man. Her captor, Liam, was back. Chapter 12 offers P.O.V. Skye's breathing had stopped along with her heart as she clapped both of her hands securely on her mouth, so she didn't give away her hiding spot, which just so happened to be the cabinet under the table in the center of the huge foyer. Skye resisted the urge to sneeze as dust filled her nostril. The door of the cabinet had woodwork at the faint corner through which Skye peeked out into the foyer as she heard the click of the front door open. She could feel herself go pale as Liam waltzed in, looking intimidating as ever. He was shirtless with sweat tickling down his side and torso. Skye looked at his dark hair sticking to his forehead and quickly snapped out of her thoughts as he cracked his neck, and she could swear she felt it chill up her spine. He still looked very scary. Very, very scary. Some things never change. She clamped her hands on her mouth as Liam began walking towards the marble table abruptly, when suddenly he stopped, dead in his tracks, and his eyes went wide. He sniffed the air and Skye saw his eyes turn golden and he cursed loudly. "Fuck Skye." He screamed and began to rush up the stairs, taking two at a time, most probably going to her prior prison. Skye took a deep breath. Should she hide or take her chances? She looked at the stairs when he left through the hole and then back at the open doors. What to do? She could feel the frustration setting in, trying to search for an answer. If she goes out, she might get caught, but if she stayed here, she could be found and get caught. She could hear things breaking, and she closed her eyes. She could hear heavy footsteps retreating down. She felt like Liam was making a lot of noise, so she knew he was coming. She was not going down without a fight. Taking a deep breath, Skye quietly took off the flip-flops, placing them behind her before she kicked the door open and quickly bolts towards the open door, rushing out into the open just as Liam came into her view. For a moment her eyes met with Liam's before going to the surrounding beyond Skye. Liam screamed as Skye ran into the forest barefoot, gaining speed. "Get back here." Liam shouts, his voice getting closer as she looks at the forest at a few distance beyond the clearing she was running on now. She could hear Liam screaming her name, but she didn't care. She needed to get away from all of them. These animals. Skye looked at the deep forest with determination. She didn't care what lurked in it, nor did she care about the consequences of being barefoot in there. All she cared about right now was to get away from Liam. Trees began to come in front of her path, slowing her down as she dodged them, going into the forest. The dirt was getting harder and her feet were probably bleeding, but there was neither going back nor giving up. Tears strolled down her cheeks as she ran, urging herself. Breathing was getting hard, but she couldn't afford to slow down. Liam was too close. Even as she swiftly changed her path, he managed to keep up, screaming at her. Liam's voice was getting crunchy and knew she was no match for him. He was faster, stronger and extraordinary. She was no match for him, but her determination was her key, her hope, her survival. Skye urged herself to go faster and faster, going deeper and deeper. Her cardigan was torn up and there was most probably dust on her clothes, but that barely mattered, and she noticed that Liam's voice had faded. Check that. There was only silence. No voice at all. Had she lost him? Skye continued to run until curiosity got the best of her, and she stopped in a small clearing with a stray log on the ground and an axe beside, making her shiver a bit. The sun was no longer scorching, preparing to set soon, but Skye's clothes still hugged her body, sticking to it from sweat as she turned around and took a few steps forward, retracing the path she had just run. Was this it? Had she seriously lost him? A sense of relief began to flood over Skye, and a smile made its way to her lips as tears of happiness now flowed. She grinned, looking at the path. She had one. For a few seconds, she just stood there, catching her breath in relief, and everything felt so easy. Like this was nothing but a small stroll out. A hearted laugh leaves her mouth as she stares at the forest and begins backing up. Time to go home, she thinks, but suddenly her back collides with something. For a moment she thinks that it's a tree, but why couldn't she feel any barks on it? And suddenly she knows what it is. She is about to scream when a hand clamps on her mouth and an arm wraps around her waist. "You know you shouldn't have done that," Liam says, and Skye meekly screams into his hands and Liam sighs. "I'm sorry, but I can't let them hurt you. I'll remove my hand from your mouth, but you need to come back with me, okay?" He says, and doesn't wait for a response as he removes his hand from her mouth. Then Skye pushes away from his body, staggering back. "Don't ever touch me," she says, and looks as Liam's eyes begin to change color, but they flick back to original as he puts his hands up in defense and takes a step back. Skye's eyes traveled around, looking for a way to outrun him, but there was nothing. "Don't even dare," Liam says calmly as he eyes her, already knowing her intentions. "Could you blame me?" The last thing I remember is you choking me, she says with tears streaming down her face. Liam's facial features change into pain and sorrow. I'm extremely sorry for that. My wolf, it got the best of me. I've been meaning to apologize to you for a week. However, you were unconscious. Weak, Sky asks, and Liam nods. Induced coma. Better recovery, he says, and Sky shakes her head in frustration. Can't you see that I don't belong to your kind? Sky says softly after a few seconds of staring at him. I don't care what my dad and Linda think. They don't know me. I can make decisions for myself and I decide to leave. Please just consider it at least. Sky asks desperately when Liam doesn't answer her. Liam sighs and looks at her with sincerity. We need to get going, Liam says, not answering her. Please, Sky begins to say, but before she could finish her sentence she was thrown over Liam's shoulder like she weighed nothing. She screamed at the top of her lungs as Liam chose to ignore her scream and began to stroll the path she had ran at mere minutes ago. Sky screamed until her throat was dry. No one can hear you. Anyone that might help you at least. You'll notice people don't define me, Liam says knowingly in hopes to strike a conversation with her, but he was surprised when he heard a sob instead, followed by another and another. He had made the girl of his dream cry yet again. The sounds of her sobs were weighing on his heart like an anchor, making him stop abruptly and gently placing her on a stray log, hearing a soft grunt from her in response, before sitting beside her, watching her sob again. He suddenly feels these extreme emotions and it takes him only a second to realize that they were Sky's emotions channeling him, through the mate bond, being so close to each other. They were strong. Pain, anguish, helplessness. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. He sometimes forgets how strong human emotions are. Werewolves never had such strong ones, mainly because many of them were suppressed by their strength and bloodthirst. It had always been like this. Liam is brought back to reality as he doesn't hear any more sobs but quiet sniffles. He looked at Sky, who wiped her tears then was cupping her face in her hands as she took deep breaths to calm her down. Liam wanted to comfort her, but he didn't want to scare her away. So not thinking, he just placed his hands on her back and gently pat and stroked it, and to his surprise Sky looked at him with her blotchy eyes. Liam thinks, but she might say something, but she doesn't. She looks at him with helplessness as more tears fall from her eyes and her lips began to quiver before she finally whispered, "Are you going to kill me?" She asks, and Liam's heart shatters, but he forces out an intended to be friendly but not so friendly, not so friendly laugh, and take a beautiful girl away from the world. No, that would be cruel, he says, smiling, hoping that she might smile to like she used to every time he met her before these circumstances, but she doesn't even bother. I won't ever hurt you. I know you're scared and you feel captive, but this is for your good. I can't blame you for your fear. Hell, I hurt you so badly and I'm so very sorry for that, but I need you to look through this and be cooperative. I'm dealing with this issue with quite a fluency, and as it's safe, I'll take you back to your home. If that's what you want, okay. Until then I'll make sure your needs are fulfilled, Liam says extremely softly. Sky looks at him for a moment when a smile comes in her face, and before he could comprehend what's happening she hugs him. Liam feels the hole in his heart fill up with her faint happiness and he begins to feel it affect him too. Thank you. But can I have my cell phone back? She adds, and he nods. Anything you want, although we'll talk about the boundaries later, he says, and she nods. The sun was already setting and it was getting dark, and Liam noticed that because he stood up and looked straight at her. Come on, it's getting dark and these woods aren't that welcoming to foreigners, he says, holding out his hand, which Sky takes willingly. Time to face facts. Chapter 13. Authors P. O. V. Sky walks side by side with Liam, looking at his huge bare back. His shoulder blades were prominent and strong. She had taken a look at his sculpted chest when all the overwhelming feelings had subsided, and she wasn't surprised to find an 8-pack. It had been some time since they were walking, and until now Sky hadn't even realized how deep she had run. Her feet were hurting, and it didn't help that neither of them was wearing shoes, but she didn't hear Liam complain. Can we take a break? Sky asks, and Liam doesn't answer as he continued to walk. He had been in his head quite a lot and it was having its toll on her. When you be nice to someone minutes ago, you don't just ignore them later on. This should be a crime. But that would be absurd. Skye wanted to stop but she wasn't going to get lost. Hell no. The sun had set and Skye could hear thunder indicating it would rain soon, and before that happened she would most probably like to be under a roof. However, the thought of being under the same roof as many animals weren't as inviting as she would have wanted it to be. Not that she had a choice. It was either this or Liam dragging her there. So she chose the more reasonable option, which was the only option. After a few more minutes, Skye's feet couldn't take it anymore. So she tried once again to bring Liam out of his thoughts. Liam, she whispers. No response. Dear, I'm tired, she says, but still no response. She reaches and touches his shoulder, causing his head to jerk as he moves it left and right. His eyes land on her. Is there anything you want? He asks, and Skye's heart began to beat faster to her surprise. I was wondering how long we have to walk. I'm just tired, she says, nervously waiting for a reaction. However, it was so dark that even if she got one, she could never see one. We're already there, he says, and he was right, because now Skye could see the forest thinning and faint luminous orange light a distance away, but all of a sudden she tensed. It was neither because of the thunder nor because of facing the people in her dirty attire. Rather, it was the rustling she heard behind her. Come on, Liam says when he notices she stopped walking. Did you hear that? Skye asks. Surely he must have. He has magnified abilities. What? He asks and turns towards Skye, who heard the faint rustling again, causing her to turn towards it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was there again. Did you hear it too? Skye says, turning to him, but Liam couldn't hear anything. How come? Unless... Liam's eyes quickly roamed around his surrounding, landing on the tree beside Skye, where the outline of a man could be seen. Liam quickly grabbed Skye just as the figure walked out from behind the tree. Skye could see nothing in the darkness but Liam's back, which was shielding her from view. She could hear the clinking of chains as the stranger's feet collided with the ground while walking. It took you long enough, Kane. Was this girl's presence so distracting her? I've to admit even the human is more valiant than you. At least she pays attention. Might I have a glimpse of her beauty? The stranger asks. His voice was extremely posh but sickly sweet and low, causing Skye to shudder. You'll have to kill me before I let you as much as even breathe the same air as her. Liam growls menacingly, holding Skye's hand protectively while the rest of his body shielded her from the stranger's view. Oh, but isn't that the main factor here, my boy? I already am dead. And whose fault is that, might I add? However, immortality has a better hold on me, don't you think? Now I'll have the privilege to torture generations of your kind while you stay helpless. Starting with your pretty little mate here. What do you say, gorgeous? The stranger says, peeking over Liam's shoulder, and Liam snarls at his direction. Keep my mate out of this, Carson. Liam shouts and Carson smirks. Oh, but pretty little Skye here and I are going to have so much fun. I'll do things to her that she would beg me to kill her, and when she does, I'll suck every single drop of blood in that gorgeous body of hers. The guy says, and that's when Skye realized she was shaking violently. Stay the hell away from her. Liam screams and lunges towards the stranger, leaving her bare, but then she feels a whiff of air and finds Liam snarling angrily, searching for the stranger. Oh dear, Liam. Have my talks angered you? Well, that proves you're not wise. Wisdom comes with the acceptance, and here you are. Can't even accept the truth. The stranger taunts, and both Skye and Liam looks at the source, which seems to be above them, on a tree. Unlike Liam, she doesn't have night vision, so all she sees is a silhouette. I think you should come and face the facts that I'll rip you apart before you even step a foot near her, Liam says, to which the guy begins laughing. Skye hears the booming sound of thunder followed by lightning, giving her a glimpse of Liam's piercing good eyes, but what caught her breath was the stranger. He looked menacing, leaning casually against the tree in heavy clothes with gold chains in his shirt and black pants. The attire looked a golf version of something one would wear in the 1880s or early 1900. His hair was a nest of the messy red lock, falling over his face, but his skin, it was the palest she had ever seen. He was frightening. Skye wanted to run away, but where? She couldn't even see. The last thing she would want to smash into a tree. Skye held her breath, wanting to disappear. Still all word to Liam. You've not changed one bit. The stranger says, and Skye hears the sound of feet colliding with the ground. Maybe the guy had jumped. Even you know that you can't even touch me. You don't have the guts to finish me then, and you don't have them now. The guy says, walking, and Skye could hear the sound getting louder and louder with each step. Oh, you don't know me anymore. And I regret showing you mercy to this day. I won't make the same mistake again. Liam seethes, and Skye feels a hand grab her arm, but it was a familiar touch, and to her shock, it brought her comfort. Liam's, of course. The guy's feet stopped just as Liam came in front of her yet again, shielding her. I'm so afraid of the big bad alpha. The guy says, taunting him before bursting into a fit of laughter, and Liam growls at him. Tell me, Mr. Alpha, have you told your pretty little mate here all the things you have done? All the humans you have killed? The guy says, and Skye's breathing once again stops at what the guy said. Human. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Suddenly Skye began to feel sick, and Valentine Carson noticed, smiling. The way you ripped them apart. Piece by piece before burning them because they were the wrong prey. Hello. And do you remember that pretty 2-year-old girl? The guy didn't get to finish his sentence as Liam lunged at him, but missed, looking here and there viciously. Skye began to hear laughter just beside her, and she screamed when an ice-cold hand snaked around her waist and pulled her to their body. Skye screamed even louder when the guy chuckled into her ear and clamped another hand on her mouth. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A pretty little thing like you shouldn't waste your breath like that. The guy says, and Skye sobs. Liam growls and loudly howls in the air, signaling his pack. He wanted to kill him right now, but the thunderstorm wasn't helping. Still, he dwelled upon his options and lunged at Carson, who was holding his mate. But in seconds Carson was out of the way behind him, still holding Skye in a deathly grip. Carson had gotten stronger. Hell, he wasn't this fast 4 years ago. See, all words. Lightly grazing his lips on Skye's cheek as she shakes violently. There. I'll take good care of you. The guy says, and presses his ice-cold lips to her cheek, causing her to sob in disgust. That was all it took him to give his control to his wolf as his bones cracked and grew out of his clothes. Valentine Carson smirked at the reaction. Everything was going accordingly. To complete the game, he says, and throws the sobbing girl to the side. Her breathing was hard, and the sound which the thunderstorm was making wasn't helping at all. She was looking for a way to run away anywhere, but she needed to get away from this guy. However, the slightest movement seemed impossible due to the darkness and all these trees. A burst of lightning illumination the forest, and Skye saw the scene in front of her. Both the guys looking at each other with murderous looks, and in seconds the vision was gone with lightning. Liam looked at Carson with a predatory glare as he lunged towards him. Carson didn't even flinch but grinned at him, and before Liam knew what's happening, Carson turned into black smoke and Liam crashed to the tree in his haze. What the hell was that? This wasn't possible. He had never seen anything like this. Liam's eyes landed towards Skye, who was crying as she tried desperately to make out a route to escape, but the darkness wasn't helping her after all. Humans didn't have night vision. His eyes traveled back at the front. The black smoke once again compiled to a figure in front of Liam, and he glared at it through his yellow eyes. You know, Liam, the tables have turned. Carson says, and Liam pounces at him again but passes through the black smoke, but this time Liam feels unbearable pain on his side. Liam turns his head and finds his side bleeding. The cut was deep and it wasn't healing. He starts breathing hard as the pain grows and looks at Carson, who was holding a very familiar silver blade in his hands. Oh, I'm sorry. My hand slipped. Does it hurt? Carson says as he crouches in front of Liam's huge wolf with mock concern. Liam spits at his face, and the mock concern changes into anger as he kicks Liam at his bloody side. You will not disrespect me. He booms before taking the knife and plunging it into his stomach. Liam howled in pain and Carson laughed. Oh, what does it hurt? he says, repeating his earlier statement and smirks satisfied, already knowing the answer. What about this? He says and takes the knife out before stabbing it back in, laughing at the sound of his pain. Don't worry, Kane. You'll be okay. Can't let you die on me, right? I want you to see all that's coming your way. This is just the beginning, he says and kicks him again. Now your pretty little mate's turn him. Don't want that pretty thing to feel miss out. Carson says, smirking, and Liam's eyes widen as he tried to get up, but the poison was spreading fast and he fell back down. Skye could hear nothing over the booming thunderstorms as she staggered back and back. Another loud roar of thunder boomed as she saw Liam lying by a tree in his blood. The forest was filled with the pitter-patter of rain and her sobs, as she saw a figure stalking towards her, and it didn't take much thinking to know it was the stranger. Please, sobbing, but she was hauled to her feet before she could even begin. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Don't cry, beautiful, the stranger says, wiping her tears, and Skye cringed when she felt her back hit the tree. She tried to look at Liam, praying that he was going to get him away. Carson noticed this and smirked. Your mate isn't going to help you. Darling, why don't you accept that? He says and grabs her hand, pinning them, and Skye screams, trying to get out of his grip. Let me go, she says, sobbing, but he tightens his grip and nuzzles his face into her neck. Please, she says, sobbing, but he cuts her off again. You're going to be okay, he says, and before Skye knows what's happening, she felt excruciating pain in her neck. Her neck burns as Carson sucked her blood out. Her hands clenched into fists from the pain as she tried to breathe, but she was too overwhelmed with everything. She could see black spots in her vision as his teeth extended out of her neck. He could feel the extraordinary taste lingering on his tongue. No human tasted like this. Well, no creature did. Her blood. It was the most extraordinary thing ever. But why? Carson looked at the tear-stained girl and cursed. He didn't mean to drink that much. She was breathing hard as if she couldn't breathe. He brought his face inches near hers and looked at her eyes just in time to see them roll back into her head, making her go limp. Carson felt something deep inside him, but he ignored it. He set the girl on the ground and saw as the rain fell over her. With one last look, he disappeared into black smoke. Chapter 14. Arthur's P. Ovi. Skye groaned as consciousness returned to her. The memories of the event prior rushed into her head and her eyes opened in terror. That guy had drunk her blood. That was the only thing in her mind as she looked around the very familiar room of the house. Who had brought her here? She felt soft sheets over her body, and she realized that nor was she only clean and washed up but also in a pair of garments. Skye brought the sheets closer to her so they hugged her body and looked around until her eyes stopped on a stretcher not far away but at a foot's distance to her right. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Laid a figure, huddled in sheets. Liam. Skye remembered how he had stood up for her in the forest, how he had tried to protect her from the beginning and found himself stabbed by that cruel stranger. Skye felt something in her heart, something she had never felt before. Was it all? Yeah, maybe, or maybe something bigger. Affection even, or just guilt for not being cooperative in the first place. Those thoughts quickly left her mind as she heard a groan from Liam, whose torso rose up in a swift second and his claws extended as his eyes roamed around the room, but to Skye's surprise, she didn't even feel scared, but a bit safe. His eyes landed on her, but he still seemed alert. It's okay now, I guess, she said, and watched as his claws extend back and he exhaled a deep breath. You okay? He asked as he shifts a bit towards her, and Skye nods. Yeah, you? She asked as she gets a glimpse of the wound on his torso, and Liam just shrugged as his eyes traveled to the window and outside to the grey sky. I like the weather. Something about the rain, he said, and Skye smiled following his gaze beyond. It's lovely, she said as both of them stared out of the window. It was awkward. She was just in a pair of garments, and he was most probably completely naked because he didn't have even a single bit of mud on him. Talking casually. For a moment Skye forgot what happened a few hours ago. Who was that guy? She finally asked, and Liam shook his head. I don't want to talk about it, he said back as easily, and with that, The conversations dropped. Neither of them talking, but the silence was comfortable. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Ignoring the fact that she was very much half naked in the same room with a guy. Her mother would have been horrified. Skye clutched the sheets closer to her and looked towards Liam, who was still deep in thought. She takes a deep breath, then clears her throat, and Liam's head quickly snapped towards her. I need clothes, she said, embarrassed and blushing profoundly. Liam smirks at her and starts chuckling a bit at her cuteness, while his wolf went crazy. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, was all he said, and continued to look at her, but with a glint in his eyes, imagining all that was underneath those sheets, which Skye didn't notice as she was looking down. I'm thankful for everything you have done. I didn't know you were risking so much until I saw you hurt back in the forest, she said, and Liam doesn't reply. Skye takes this as a sign and shuts up when he speaks up. It's nice to know that you cooperate now, he said huskily, and Skye nods. Liam removes the sheets off his body and suddenly gets up, causing Skye to cover her eyes in case he was naked. Liam laughed at her innocent action as he grabbed a pair of pants and quickly sewed them on. You could open your eyes now, he said as he buttoned it up and watched as Skye peeked from underneath her fingers, before taking them off completely, causing her to blush when she saw he was still shirtless. Did you plan on telling me before getting up like that? Skye breathed out, and Liam shrugged, causing her to pinker than already, which was a lot. Liam chuckled and shook his head, and Skye frowned as she stared at his chest. It took him a second to realize she was staring at the wounds that were exposed, so they would heal more quickly. Do they hurt? She asked, and Liam shook his head. No, you don't need to worry about them, he said, but her eyes never left the wounds. You would have cared if that was me in your place, and I know you did, to go to such an extent for my safety, so I just want to return the favor. Well, I am a big bad beast, he said truthfully, but she shrugged it off. A nice beast at that. And you know, I really am sorry for my previous behavior, and I am willing to look past those differences. So friends. Extending her hand out, not moving from the place on the bed as the sheets were securely wrapped around her to hide her obvious neckdances, and Liam looked at it. This was something a fifth grader would do, but from all the seriousness on her face, Liam knew she wasn't joking, so he reached towards the place on the bed and placed her hands in his. Friends, he said, and shook it, causing Skye to give him a bright smile. About the clothes, she began, and Liam shook his head. Don't mention it. I'll ask someone to bring them up right now, he said before leaving the room and closing the door securely, so no one walks in on his mate. He very much would like to have mated with her right now, but things were progressing. Things are going to be very well, Liam said to himself as he planned to get out of the friend zone soon and opening the concept of mate to her. But that was just a big lie as Carson smiled his wicked grin, disappearing into nothingness. This was just the mere beginning. Chapter 15, Author's P. O.V. Skye clutches the sheets closer to her as the door closed, daring to look at the garments and blushes at the black lace cloth. Who in their right mind would own such a piece of clothing? Her heart begins to beat loudly at the thought of who changed her into them in the first place. However, her thoughts were cut short as the door opens minutes later and a girl walks in. She has black hair which was back-combed into a huge bun and piercing grey eyes which were hidden under loads of black eyeliner and eyeshadow. Her lips were coated with black lipstick and the spider bites gleamed, making Skye's eyes widen. She was wearing ripped shorts and cropped loose top over a dark blue fitted tank top, which was the only colour instead of black on her. Her combat boots had spikes, making Skye gulp. Complete goth and badass. Alpha told me you needed clothes, she says, but in a questioning manner, and Skye nods hastily, breathing hard, causing the girl to laugh. You look like you're going to piss yourself, she says, setting the clothes down on the bed, and Skye jumps a bit at her roughness. No need to be scared, human. I don't bite. Besides, how are you feeling? Pretty bummed when the rest of us found you and the alpha in the forest, she says while reaching for something in her backpack and in seconds placing the death stick in her mouth. before grabbing a lighter from her other pocket and lighting the cigarette up. Taking a long drag, Skye watches with wide eyes. As the girl took long drags. If that would have been her mother's corpse would have had a heart attack. The girl notices Skye's reaction and smirks. Oh, I see. The human scared. Well, get used to it, cause you're going to be seeing my shitty face a lot here. Come on. Dress up, we have got a lot of stuff to do. The girl says with authority, and Skye nods and grabs the piece of clothing, which were a combination of black and light blue denim. Skye don't even bother to look at them as she gets up, wrapping the sheets around her, and the girl rolled her eyes before laughing. You know, I'm a girl. Straightened, also the person who changed you last night. So yeah, I've pretty much seen everything. The girl says, and Skye goes scarlet, holding the clothes closer to her with one hand while clutching the sheets together. I'm wearing you, Skye says, motioning towards her, and the girl grins. Thought it would spice things up. Besides, my mate likes them, she says, winking, and Skye go more scarlet before rushing to the bathroom, hearing the girl's laughter behind her. What the hell is a mate? She thinks as the sheets drop on the floor in a heap, leaving her in the lacy garments. Maybe a boyfriend or something. She shakes her head and grabs the pair of clothes, unfolding them to see what they were. Much to her dismay, they weren't to her comfort. A cropped black top and denim short shorts. Something she would never wear. It was too revealing, and the weather was a bit cold outside as autumn was rolling in. Skye stares at the clothes and dwells upon her options. It was either that or the garment she was in. Knowing the reasonable thing to do, she slips into the piece of clothing over the garments after splashing water on her face and taking the decency to comb her hair. In seconds she was dressed and feeling extremely naked as she looks at her long bare legs and her stomach. A cardigan would do wonders right now. Skye jumps a bit when she heard slamming on the door. Hey, did you die in there or something? Come out. We have things to do. The girl shouts, and Skye takes a deep breath as she runs her hand through her hair, before going to the door and peeking out to see the girl annoyed. What are you waiting for? She asks as she impatiently taps her foot. Can I get a cover-up or cardigan of sort, please? Skye asks, and the girl rolls her eyes. I don't own any, she says, and Skye looks at her uncomfortably. Can't you ask anyone? She asks, and the girl snaps. Look, I don't, you know what? She says, and walks towards the wardrobe at the side of the bed, opening it and grabbing something before tossing it to her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Wear this. Now come on, she says, and Skye looks at the sweater in her hands that smelled heavily of cologne. But isn't this Liam's? Skye asks. Yes, don't you worry. The alpha won't mind. The girl says. Skye puts on the oversized button-down sweater. The sleeves were long and Skye has to grab them a bit, and the girl laughs. Oh wow, so cute. The girl says, and Skye just looks away, ignoring the girl's snarky comments, and slips on a pair of black flip-flops. Come on, let's get lunch. I'm starving like hell, she says, and Skye follows her, folding the sleeves of the sweater up, so she doesn't have to pull them every second or so. They climb down the stairs, but just as they were going down, a guy, heavily pierced and tatted, grabs the girl and slams her into the wall. For a moment Skye thought that he was harassing the girl until they started making out. Skye went bright red with embarrassment as she saw the scene in front of her. From the looks of it, they were going to gnaw each other's face off. Not that they would mind. Skye quickly walks away from the girl and hugged herself, while clutching the sweater tightly as she walks down the stairs. That was awkward. She breathes out, when she was sure that she was far away from them, but decided to check and turn her head around to see if she was following her. Luckily she wasn't. Now to think of it, the girl never told Skye her name. Skye shrugs and turns back around, only for her body to slam into someone else's, making her fall to the ground with sparks dingling her body. She looks at the person groaning and saw him already leaning down and helping her up. Hey, you okay? He asks gently as Skye rubs her head and nods. Yay, sorry for bumping into you, she says, and looks at him, only to find him staring at her with a genuine expression. I hope you don't mind me wearing your sweater. I know I should have asked, but I really needed a cover up. These clothes are a bit too revealing and I didn't want to roam around half-naked, she says shyly, and Liam finally looks at her exposed legs and his eyes darken a bit only for them to go back to normal the second he recognizes the sweater and laughs. You can have it. And don't worry, we'll go shopping and get you some new clothes. Which might be your comfort. Liam says, and Skye shakes her head. No, please. You don't need to waste your money on me. Besides, if someone could just take me home to gather my belongings, the issue would be solved, she says, and Liam inwardly sighs. She is too modest. He would sacrifice his life for her and she is concerned about his money. How about we grab lunch? Then we can get you stuff from your house, he says, and Skye nods happily. Thank you. That would be really nice, she says, and before she can stop herself she hugs him and feels tingly again. Why is she feeling like this? She quickly let go and blushes as she regains her senses. And so does Liam before he gently grabs her hand, leading her to the dining room. Come on. You haven't eaten for a while. I don't want you fainting now, he says, and Skye just follows even though she wasn't hungry at all. The wall to the dining room was short with the hallway empty. However, as they started getting closer to the dining room, the voices of people talking begins to grow. How many people actually live here? Skye mutters, not expecting an answer, but to her surprise, he replies, many. Soon they enter the dining room and Skye's eyes widen in shock. The dining room was a massive room with an extremely large table, occupied by at least 100 or more people who were staring at them. They all stand up in respect and Skye begins to feel giddy because of the attention. She looks at many faces but doesn't find her dad or Linda. Continue, Liam says, and everyone sits back down and begins chattering, but this time in whispers directed towards Skye. Come on, Liam says, and grabs her hand, leading her to the head of the table where two chairs were empty. He helps her into one of them and Skye mutters a thank you before he settles down beside her, their shoulders touching. If you don't mind me asking, where's Dad? I haven't seen him for quite some time, Skye says, and Liam looks at her just as maids start bringing in piles of food. I sent him away along with our Zeta to keep him safe. I planned to send you with them but things got out of hand, he says, not letting out anything else, and Skye shuts up, taking this as a cue. Everyone starts buying food on their plate as Skye examines the view out of the huge window. The grass was wet because of rain. The sky was grey and the forest looks as unwelcoming as ever. She continues to stare at it, focusing on every single detail, when suddenly a figure moving in the forest catches her attention. She moves forward and squints her eyes as the figure runs again. Skye jumps as a hand touches her shoulder but doesn't remove her eyes from the forest. You okay? Liam asks during something, and Skye nods just as she gets an urge to go to the forest. It was like a force was pulling her. Yes, fine, she says, and looks at the figure that suddenly stops and is now facing her, making her go pale. She recognizes the familiar face even from the distance as the guy waved at her. You look pale, Skye. Is everything okay? Liam asks, and she shakes her head this time, not taking her eyes off of the guy. What's wrong? Liam asks, looking at her. He's back.